So we're here today to talk about small modular reactors and our goal to reach net zero. So this technology, small modular reactors, constitute an innovative technology, one in which is really going to help us reach our goal of net zero. And in Brunswick, we're fortunate enough to have two innovative companies developing their technology around small modular reactors. We have Arc Clean Energy and Moltex Energy. So this topic is very sort of near and dear to our heart, and I'm very interested to dig into this a little bit deeper today and have discussions with our panel around this subject. So today, we're very fortunate enough to have Dale Atkinson, the Chief Nuclear Officer and Chief Operations Officer at NuScale. We have Jessica Lovering, founder of the Good Energy Collective, and we have Willie Cook with me here on stage, and he's the professor and chair of chemical engineering and the director of nuclear energy research at the University of New Brunswick. And also we have King Lee, who is the director of the Harmony program for the World Nuclear Association. So before we get into our specific questions for the panel here today, I thought we'd do a quick roundtable with everybody and have everybody introduce themselves and talk a little bit about their views on the subject at hand. So, Dale, if you'd like to start us off, I'll hand it over to you.
Very good. I appreciate the opportunity. As mentioned, I'm Dale Atkinson, Chief Nuclear Officer and Chief Operating Officer for NuScale Power, and I appreciate the opportunity to discuss opportunities and benefits of small modular reactors and how the technology can be brought to Canada and the world. NuScale is on the frontier of innovation in energy. We have a very unique small modular reactor design with unparalleled safety and reliability features, fully factory made, offers scalable power based on need. And this is frankly unprecedented in our industry. We're very proud to be developing and ready to currently manufacture and start up these plants around the world. This technology is carbon-free, has a lot of capabilities simply not found in today's large nuclear power plants, including the ability to extensively load follow. We see that as a key to incorporation with all of the tools in the toolbox as we attack the climate change problem. Simplicity is really what makes our SMR technology smarter. The technology is premised on well-established nuclear technology principles, namely quite a history with light water reactor technology, but the small size and simple design of the NuScale power module eliminates many of the large and complex systems found in today's nuclear power plants and some other SMR designs. Each of our modules can generate 77 megawatts of electricity. They can be configured in 4, 6, and 12 module plant sizes to provide a range of 308 megawatts up to 924 megawatts. Each module actually has its own independent power conversion system, which creates really unprecedented reliability as well. These modules can be added incrementally even after the first one is in operation. And again, that scalable feature is something we found many clients are quite interested in. Because of the very strong safety case, our technology is ideally suited to repower retiring coal-fueled power plants. It's suitable for small grids, large grids, distributed generation applications, including being completely off-grid. There is no reliance on electricity off-site or on-site for protection of the health and safety of the public. And as a result, this flexible operation and ability to complement renewables, they can, in addition, provide process heat for a variety of industrial applications such as thermal desalinization, district heating, and hydrogen production. Additionally, one of the things we found is with the multiple modules and independent power, we can provide really unprecedented reliability, and can be done so even on a microgrid. That's providing an opportunity for highly reliable power to be provided to critical infrastructure like medical facilities, defense, digital data storage centers, and other mission-critical installations that require that level of reliability. Additionally, in August of 2020, we made history as the first ever small modular reactor and advanced nuclear technology design to be approved by the U.S. Nuclear Regulatory Commission. It was a tremendous accomplishment, and I'm very proud of all of our staff that worked so hard to make that become real. Here in Canada, with our NRC-approved SMR technology, we're currently in the pre-licensing vendor design review process with the Canadian Nuclear Safety Commission, and we're ready to support this market. In December of 2019, we made our first submittal to the CNSC for pre-licensing vendor design, and we've made significant progress moving forward with that process. As Canada continues toward phasing out coal-fired electricity generation and invests in new clean technology, NuScale can provide affordable, emissions-free, and carbon-free clean energy solutions. We're eager to play a part in helping Canada become a world leader in SMR development. The advanced nature of NuScale's SMR technology also means that NuScale, in cooperation with Canadian firms, stands ready to support Canada in bringing its first SMR unit to operation by the late 2020s. We have strong partnerships in the Canadian energy sector that augment our technology's alignment with Canadian needs and look forward to strengthening them as needed. NuScale has supply chain partnerships across Canada that we are prepared to leverage for projects in Canada and around the world. With that brief introduction of NuScale and its technology, I look forward to addressing questions that will follow. Thank you very much.
Oh, great. I'm muted. Well, thank you so much for having me. I look forward to this conversation. But I did just want to set the stage a little bit about some of the non-technological issues that we've been working on with Good Energy Collective. So in the last decade, and especially in the last 5 years, we've seen the pace of technological innovation really accelerate in nuclear. And across North America, there are around 70 companies working on advanced nuclear designs. I know we have some of them here today. And many of them are looking at smaller modular nuclear reactors. So I've spent kind of the past 10 years working on policies to accelerate commercialization of advanced nuclear designs, things on, federal innovation policy, demand side, market reform. But there are also a few trends that we've noticed and events that motivated the creation of Good Energy Collective, which is more focused on the social issues. So we saw these growing movements of climate change groups that look very different than environmental groups of the past. They were younger, more pragmatic, and much more aggressive and ambitious in their goals and what they were trying to achieve. They were pushing really hard on governments to take serious action on climate, but they weren't really talking about nuclear. And so we were seeing if maybe there's an opening there because these groups are looking different. And we've also seen a growing focus on environmental justice, not just globally, but in the Biden administration, along with inclusion of social and economic justice in climate issues and environmental issues. And we think this is a really great shift, but we also know that nuclear has somewhat of a problematic legacy. Weapons testing and a lot of issues with mining and where mining occurred and who was affected. And so, we have the commercialization of all these great new technologies, but we realize that we also need innovations in all the other aspects of nuclear power. So we're going to need different kinds of business models, but also innovations in how we site the plants, how we choose the locations, and also how vendors are going to collaborate and co-develop projects with host communities. Because with different technologies, especially with small and micro reactors, you could see very different ownership models, very different deployment models. There's opening up new markets. So there's a lot of policy questions and a lot of social questions about how this will work. And It's going to need to be a little different to succeed, but we think that with these new technologies, we can actually see a very different but a much more successful, thriving nuclear power market going forward that fits into this broader goal and broader agenda of deep decarbonization of the power sector.
Thank you, Jessica. That was great. Some really interesting insights, and I hope we get to dig into some of those, especially the social aspect of what you mentioned. Willie, if you'd like to give us a brief intro and talk a little bit about what the University of New Brunswick's up to.
Oh, sure. Thanks, Martin. Willie Cook. I'm a professor in chemical engineering department at the University of New Brunswick, but I also currently am holding the role of director for the Center for Nuclear Energy Research. A lot of people didn't know that UNB has actually been actively engaged in nuclear research for pretty well 30 years.
Wow.
When CNER was first established. And the Nuclear Institute at UNB has primarily been focused on supporting conventional technology, CANDU reactors, because as you know, we have Point Lepreau, which is just down the street from Fredericton and UNB. The small modular reactor opportunity and the approach that New Brunswick has taken has actually been quite exciting, not only for those of us in the province, but also for the University of New Brunswick. And you mentioned the partners in the SMR cluster in New Brunswick, Moltex and ARC. And what the New Brunswick approach has been onto this is to really go to the next step. We can look at all sorts of applications like we've discussed already, on-grid or remote or micro, and that's great for providing electricity for grid support and for remote locations, or even if you look at far north, district heating and other things that would offset the reliance on fossil fuels, diesel, which would probably primarily be done there. New Brunswick has taken this one step further, and instead of looking at small modular reactors per se, just for electricity production, looking at mechanisms using advanced Generation 4 reactor technologies that can maybe have an impact on some of the social factors that you said you wanted to discuss.
Yes.
So the advanced technologies in going to coolants such as molten salts or liquid sodium, liquid metals like ARC is going to, it really changes the game in terms of the safety case and the operation for the reactors. And it opens up opportunities for grid support and offsetting the variability of renewables. Wind doesn't always blow, sun doesn't always shine. We need backup power generation in order to accommodate those flexible nature of the renewables. And nuclear is a carbon-free option that we can use to supplement and really augment the growing renewable industry. The advanced reactors in New Brunswick have many other benefits as well, such as innovative fueling and technology designs in order to offset long-lived reactor waste and reusing the material again in the reactor, so we eliminate that and reduce volumes and longevity. And University of New Brunswick is really playing quite a large role in this. We were invited in 2018 when the New Brunswick cluster was first established to engage with the partners, Moltex and ARC, to look at really what their R&D needs would be in order to go through the CNSC licensing criteria and to provide the information that would back up their licensing case. Mm-hmm. So over the past 2 and a bit years now, we've been actively engaged with both and looking at those research programs and how we can help support the growing business in New Brunswick. This has really led to, at this point for the University of New Brunswick, a doubling in our research capabilities in terms of scientists, research staff, and obviously graduate students, which we're training those highly qualified professionals to be knowledgeable into this technology so they can come into the workforce. But also at UNB, we've looked at our undergraduate teaching curriculum within the engineering program to see how we can further support this. And I'm happy to say that we've now relaunched and rolled out our nuclear option programs within the chemical engineering department and have had a handful of graduates from that first rollout this past May. Mm-hmm. And students are very excited and engaged about this opportunity. They see this as a potential future, not only for decarbonizing the energy infrastructure, but also for long-term employment. And the university is really trying to gear up at this point so we can help support.
Perfect. Well, thank you very much, Willie. That's very interesting and some really great insights into what the University of New Brunswick is doing. King, if you want to jump in and sort of give us the perspective around the Harmony program, and I'd love to hear about it.
Oh, right. Thank you. Thank you very much for the Toronto Global Forum for inviting me to speak at this panel. So my name is King Lee, Director of Harmony Program from the World Nuclear Association. I was attending the COP26 climate conference in Glasgow last week. And I think this panel discussion is very timely and particularly relevant in the current debate on the pathway to net zero. So I would draw on some of this work and also my observations and some observation around COP as well. So first of all, I'd like to say a few words about our organization, the World Nuclear Association, which is an international organization that represents the global nuclear industry. Its mission is to promote the wider understanding of nuclear energy among key international influences by producing authoritative information, developing common industry position, and contributing to the energy debate. Our membership encompasses virtually all of the world uranium mining, conversion, enrichment, and fuel fabrication companies, and all major reactor vendors, including nuclear utilities providing 70% of the nuclear generation. Returning to COP26, the World Nuclear Association have been supporting the United Nations Economic Commission for Europe, UNECE, on their carbon neutrality project, helping countries on the pathway to net zero and engaging with stakeholders at the United Nations High Energy Dialogue on Energy, at the UN General Assembly in September, and at COP. UNECE consists of 56 member states, including North America, Europe, and Central Asia. The UNECE Carbon Neutrality Project aims to help countries to develop and implement and track national sustainable energy policy to mitigate against climate change and more importantly, to contribute towards sustainable development. As part of the Carbon Neutrality Project, we prepare a brief on nuclear power and its role on climate change to help countries to reach net zero. The information can be found on the UNECE website. Here are some of the key takeaways from the Carbon Neutrality Project. Nuclear is an essential, important source of low carbon electricity and heat that can contribute to carbon neutrality. All low carbon technology are required to transition to a low carbon economy, and nuclear have an important role to play. As we are discussing about SMR, nuclear innovation will complement existing large-scale reactors and open new applications for nuclear energy, which include district heating, high-temperature process heat, and hydrogen production. The project is also performing energy modeling, look at both large-scale reactors and SMR for these application and production of hydrogen, and this work is still ongoing. But as part of the project, we'll also assess life cycle assessment for the wide range of electricity generation technology. This life cycle assessment report has just been released in this week, and nuclear power have been shown to have a lower human health and environmental impact than fossil fuel, and is comparable with renewable energy source. Nuclear power has the lowest greenhouse gas emission of all low carbon generation options assessed, with a global average emission of just 5.5 grams CO2 equivalent per kilowatt hour. Our work with UNECE shows that nuclear energy can be an indispensable tool for achieving the UN sustainable goals. It is a crucial role providing affordable energy and also climate change mitigation, but as well as limiting poverty achieving zero hunger and providing clean water, economic growth, and industry innovation. Our view, demonstrating the sustainability of nuclear energy is of critical importance, as the world economy is increasingly focused and move towards climate and sustainable finance. Financing was one of the main discussion and negotiation items at COP26. Another observation at COP26 is the SMR development and deployment is moving at pace. For example, at COP26, NuScale Power and the Romanian national nuclear company Nuclear Electrica signed a teaming agreement. Yesterday, Rolls-Royce announced they have secured private and UK government funding for the development of their small modular reactor. These announcements at COP26 built on recent SMR development, including last month, France President Macron announced a €1 billion to develop France small modular reactor technology. This is in addition to the intention of building additional large reactor units. Russia announced plans for several further SMR to power mining development in the Arctic region, building on their current experience of their floating nuclear power reactors. China, high-temperature gas-cooled reactor in Shandong province achieved their first criticality in September this year, and this reactor is scheduled to connect to the grid before the end of this year. These activities show that SMR, together with large-scale reactor, will be part of our future energy mix. The pace and extent of SMR development and deployment depends on policy, energy market design, and technological development.
Thank you, King. So what I thought we might do is, you mentioned a lot of interesting things there, King, around the financial aspect. So I think it would be good to put this question out there to the group. And I'll start with Dale. With the cost of renewables coming down all the time, will nuclear still be cost feasible? And the second part of that question is, what finance options or policies do you think would help contribute to keeping the cost in line?
Sure, I appreciate the question. I think what's important to consider is the selection of generating resources that utilities really have to sort out as they make their long-term plans. So I don't think it's an or question, direct competition on kilowatt hour cost, because we've got capacities, resiliencies, renewable portfolio standards. It's actually a pretty complicated condition for utilities to sort out. Nonetheless, what we're seeing is the ability of now to factory manufacture, reduce construction times, negotiate and have sorted out everything from testing requirements to permitting issues. It's actually helping tremendously that we see. As an example, our design uses the maximum commercial off-the-shelf items that we can. Since we don't require electricity, any additional water or operator action for health and safety concerns, it just makes it a lot easier to use commercial products that simply aren't as expensive. In addition, by keeping the reactor small, we avoid about 2/3 of the systems of like Generation 2 reactors would have, and that makes life a lot simpler too. We have worked with engineering, procurement, and construction companies such as Fluor to optimize the construction. And again, what that does is not only lower the cost, but it has a significant effect on reducing schedule. So our construction times are now well under 36 months. And remember, when you put the first module in, which you really do as the plant nears completion, you're ready to turn on the first module before another module may even be on site to be inserted. So it helps quite a bit in the financial part when you start getting income as early as possible. We're seeing that our overnight costs and levelized cost of energy basis are very competitive with other generation sources. And what we're finding as we talk to utility customers is that they realize the cost of firming power. They're looking at the generation profile by hour, or in many cases by minute during the day, and they need to have some carbon-free load following or base loads or a combination of both in order to make their grid needs be met. We really believe that the operating maintenance costs for these NuScale modules are going to be much lower than the lowest cost performers in the current U.S. nuclear fleet. And it makes sense to me, having operated the big ones. There's just not that many components to work on. And those that we have are small. As I said, the bulk are commercial grade and just makes life a lot simpler. What we really see is policies and financing mechanisms that incentivize clean energy and include nuclear. So the language around carbon-free versus strictly renewable is really important. The utilities need all those tools to meet the needs and continue to reduce the carbon footprint. So we really believe those policies implemented correctly will support the development of SMRs and actually enable a faster overall transition to a carbon-free energy. It's an exciting time, frankly.
Thanks, Dale. That was really great. Jessica, what do you think about that and the financing options and how how it competes with renewables?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's important to keep in mind that we've never built nuclear in this new way, modular factory fabricated designs. And so we don't know exactly how it'll work out, but there's a lot of, theory and evidence from other energy technologies that modularity can help bring costs down significantly. But you also need supportive policies to make that happen. So what we've seen with renewables, of course, is that decades of policies, things like renewable portfolio standards, tax credits, loan guarantees have helped increase demand for the technology, which helps companies be willing to invest in, the manufacturing facilities to make a bunch of these turbines or solar panels. You need to have that sort of long order book in order to make those investments. So demand side policies are huge, and we'd love to see more nuclear be on a level playing field or see similar policies to what renewables have benefited from. Mm-hmm. But also financing can be really significant and sort of make or break for these projects. Renewables have also benefited from a lot of innovative financing mechanisms, not just in North America, but around the world. And that hasn't really been available for nuclear. In the past, nuclear has tended to be very state supported, very large utilities. And with SMRs, we might be seeing that change, especially if you can place an order and know when you're going to get the reactor, even if it's going to take a few years. If you have more certainty around the timeline, it's easier to finance, but also seeing more kind of creative ways of financing could be really helpful. And when you're looking at different ownership models like commercial ownership or big industrial owners or even small community ownership of SMRs, you're going to need a lot more, not just creativity in finance, but also policies that support financing of these clean energy projects.
Perfect. Thank you. Willie, I'll turn this over to you. From a New Brunswick perspective, it would be interesting to see, what you think about this question as it relates to the cost of renewables and what we're doing in the province of New Brunswick.
Yeah. First caveat on this, I'm an engineering professor and not an expert in financing nuclear fleets, but
fair.
A couple of key points that had come out. I think in going to a small modular reactor system, the key idea on that is simplicity. Mm-hmm. Scale down the size so that the components aren't so massive. The inherent safety nature of the way the SMRs are being designed with passive safety systems, not as much intervention and safety design aspects having to go into it to satisfy safety cases. That's really one of the key aspects that will make the SMR and the advanced reactor technologies really viable from a more financial standpoint. Another good point that I think Dale made on it was using off-the-shelf components where as much as possible. In New Brunswick, there's a lot of interest, particularly in not only taking that as off-the-shelf components, but looking at building that supply chain to feed into the small modular reactor factories in New Brunswick as the fleet starts to roll out. And I can give an example on that one right now. We have some senior engineering design teams and capstone design projects looking at the viability of production of, for example, the coolant salt for a Moltex SSRW reactor. We could potentially locate that facility in New Brunswick, produce the salt, which would go to the modular construction facility and then supplied for that reactor technology. Again, keeping it right in New Brunswick. So not having to rely on national or international supply chains in order to bring that type of capabilities. I think in the New Brunswick standpoint, it's a huge economic opportunity, not just to go and make sure we have grid stability. New Brunswick is actually very fortunate to have a variety of generating capacity around the province, including renewables, nuclear, wind, solar. But there's still a large component there, which is coal, which will have to be offset by 2030. And a lot of the generating capacity in New Brunswick is also nearing end of useful life as well by the time 2040 runs around. So these new advanced reactor technologies and SMRs could really revolutionize the economic situation in New Brunswick by providing not only the grid support and electricity and energy infrastructure, but the good job market to help support that.
Thank you, Willie. I think you touched on a lot of different things there that will be very interesting as we move along, particularly around the supply chain initiatives, but that could be a whole separate conversation in itself. King, what do you think from a world perspective? You have more of a holistic view. I'd be very interested to get your opinion on how you think this competes on a world stage with the cost of renewables.
I perhaps make a couple of comments in addition to what already been said. One, levelized cost of literacy only provide a part of the picture, not complete. This most important thing is we need to look at the total cost of the whole energy system and the total cost to consumers. So therefore, with increasing share of variable electricity, the system cost becomes significant to providing storage, interconnectors, and backup capacity. So those are not included in levelized cost of electricity. So, for example, a recent study got published by the French grid operators, I think was released last week, shows that they assess a range of different scenario of energy mix, and they can from 100% renewable to a 50% or so of nuclear. They found that a mixture of large scale reactors, SMRs, and renewable provide the lowest cost and lowest risk. And then second point I would like to make as well, nuclear, both large and small, are capital intensive. So for example, in UK case, building a large reactors on Hinkley, 2/3 of the total cost is relating to financing. So therefore, having access to low cost financing, having huge impact on the cost. So for example, UK government just announced last month a new financing model for nuclear project. So it's called the regulatory asset base. So that allowed to attract private finance for nuclear projects and also cutting down the lower cost of financing costs. And so therefore lead to a lower cost to the consumer. So this will be really interesting in terms of, I think, what Jessica mentioned, having an innovative financing model and attracting a low cost finance.
Thank you. One of the things we touched on, I think everyone here has actually touched on, and I think this is really a relevant question to ask. And I'll go back to Dale for this one. How do you think the small modular reactors will help enable alternate fuels in the future?
Yeah, the alternate fuels question has become a very hot topic. I will point out that we've done studies on using the NuScale SMRs for hydrogen generation for many years. To that end, we've looked at both providing high-capacity baseload to do it, using flexible load operation, shifting output between hydrogen generation and grid needs, all kinds of options. So we do see that hydrogen is going to become a rather huge forward-looking market. And so there's a lot of interest in industry and frankly, around the globe in hydrogen production. In 2014, we conducted a study with the Idaho National Lab to evaluate the technical feasibility of using the NuScale module to produce hydrogen. Understand that the lead technology evaluated at that time is high temperature steam electrolysis. And the expectation, I know from a lot of people, was our reactor just doesn't produce high enough temperature steam to effectively run that process. It was very interesting to turn out that our reactor produces superheated steam, significantly superheated. Once you have superheated steam, it doesn't take much energy to drive the temperature way up. So we found that using about 2% of the output as topping heaters was more than adequate to run the high temperature process. But actually looking forward, we actually see that there are other technologies that are maturing now, solid oxide electrolysis, for example, that will probably make this work even more cost effective and frankly make it much easier to merge the technology with the needs of the grid, for a particular owner. We do see that a single module could produce enough hydrogen to power about 38,000 fuel cell vehicles or 1,500 long-haul fuel cell trucks at average annual fuel usage rates, and so it can have a big impact on that transportation side of the climate change issue. Additionally, it can be used to produce syngas, which can be used to produce synfuel if there's a need for that as a method for transportation. Additionally, it can be used for blending for global jet fuel. There's certifications and process for that. So fundamentally, what we see is that having a carbon-free power source, such as our modules, we think works very, very well. And we're seeing that interest by nations and companies, and believe that it's going to be quite a bit of the future of NuScale and frankly the planet in general. So it's very hydrogen generation, direct air capture, other technology using power from a carbon-free source, such as NuScale power modules, really looks to be an effective path. Additionally, we're already in the details of manufacturing readiness, so there's no real technology demonstration to be done. We're working with different fabricators, including in Canada, to be ready to provide these modules as soon as the end of 2027, the first quarter of 2028. So it's an exciting time for us, as I said, and we look forward to these forward-looking countries and companies that want to engage in hydrogen and direct air capture. Thank you.
That's great. Thank you, Dale. Now we're down to under 10 minutes. So what I thought we might do is I'm going to skip to a specific question for Jessica that I think is most relevant for her. And it's on the society's view of nuclear reactors and how that's going to impact the placement as we move forward and where these things can go. And I thought this would be a great question for you to weigh in on, Jessica, just for the sake of time.
Yeah, I think something that's interesting that, Dale touched on is we have a diversity of new nuclear technologies, and that opens up a lot of new markets. It also opens up where these plants can be sited. So we may not be constrained to the same type of locations of where these plants were in the past. They could maybe even be put in near smaller communities or have smaller utilities own them. But that does open up a question of how do we decide where to place them? And I think the big change that we'd like to see is the nuclear industry, especially in the U.S., but really everywhere, got into this model with the big nuclear build out in the 60s and 70s of what was called decide and defend, or decide, announce, defend. And that had really negative repercussions in that sometimes places didn't really want the nuclear power plant, but they didn't really have a choice, and they sort of had to come to terms with it. So what we want to see is developing a new model of how these sites are chosen, but also have it be more iterative and collaborative. So rather than say, okay, let's choose the best site for safety, environmental risks, where the power is needed, you have a lot more flexibility in where these can go. So you could do something more like, okay, let's say the specifications we're looking for and then take bids from communities. So this is a lot like what was done in Sweden and Finland around nuclear waste siting, of saying, okay, we want to put waste somewhere. We're going to take interest from communities. So let us know if you might be willing to host this, you might be interested. No commitment. We can just start exploring that together. So doing this for nuclear power plant, could be even easier, because this is something that would provide a lot of jobs, a lot of economic benefits for the community. So the community should be willing to host it, but obviously a lot of them aren't going to be interested, and that's okay. So we want to find the places that are not just willing to host a nuclear plant, but actually excited and want to help develop the project in collaboration with the vendor. So just one example I wanted to point out, and something that we're looking at a lot more now, is coal power repowering. So taking coal plants that have recently retired or are planning to retire in the next decade, and saying, could they be repowered with an SMR? Now, how tight that repowering is, whether you're reusing the actual steam turbine or whether you're just using the site, so a brownfield site. There's lots of variations on that, but that could be something really positive, where you have a big, economic driver of a community is going to shut down, and a lot of people are going to lose their jobs. So providing this new opportunity for something new and exciting that employs more people in a lot of cases could be a big win-win for these communities. But again, it's not going to be for everyone. So you really need to start engaging with potential communities now, very early, and talking them through, what concerns do they have, what would make it worth it for them, what sort of work retraining is needed, what sort of environmental remediation is needed, to make the community really excited to host a new nuclear facility. But I definitely think there's going to be a lot of places that are interested. So if it's done right, that won't be a problem.
Thank you, Jessica. There's certainly a lot to dig into in that subject, and with regards to where these things can go. And the interesting part of it's going to be the fact that, based on an individual country's, a location's, region's perspective on the small modular reactor and its benefit, is going to have a large impact on whether or not that'll actually be developed in that particular region. So certainly a lot to take in there. We're down to just a few minutes left. So Willie, I wanted to ask you a question about timeline. And will it take too long to develop these technologies if we're going to meet our net zero targets?
That's a bit of a loaded question.
It is rather a loaded question, yes.
So I think we're to the point now, and NuScale is well on the way to showing that this is feasible, that in the very short term, small modular reactor technologies based on conventional water-based designs, but with enhanced characteristics, can provide a very short-term solution. And I'm sure Dale can give you some information on timelines on that. Where we look at the advanced Gen 4 reactors like we are in New Brunswick, those timelines are obviously a bit longer because none of those types of reactors have operated commercially. So there is a significant amount of research and development and vetting of those designs which need to go in to ensure that it can meet the safety and licensing case. So I think it's a good mix between the different types of SMR technologies in terms of rollout, and as we look to 2050 net zero, I do think that target is fully doable. And Jessica hit it there as well. Nuclear needs to play a role, and education of the public, and starting in grade schools all the way up through some of the things that we're doing at the university for engineering grads to make them ready for the market as it comes into place is key. Another point, just back to the social aspect, you mentioned the waste disposal in Finland and Sweden. Canada has an excellent example of that as well with the Nuclear Waste Management Organization, which over the past 20 years has engaged the Canadian public to find out if there are willing host communities for nuclear waste disposal. And originally there was over 20 who raised their hand and wanted to participate and get more information, and it's down to final site selection now between two communities. So it's a long-term engagement process, but it works very well, and the public needs to be well informed and engaged.
Okay. There's certainly a lot of things to unpack in this whole subject, and I don't think we're going to be able to get to any more today, just for the sake of time. I want to thank everybody on the panel for their insightful comments and the discussion. This is a subject that I'm sure we could revisit and break down each one of these topics we touched on today further. But today we'll have to leave it as it is, and I hope everybody enjoyed the discussion as much as I did, and thank you very much for taking the time today.